Good morning, everyone. My name is Masai Sakai, person in charge of English Public Relations at the JICA-Colombian office. Speaking of Colombia, what kind of impression do you have? Coffee, woman's beauty, emeralds, tropical music? Maybe those are the typical and the positive images of the country. However, there are negatives such as arms conflict, kidnapping, drugs, traffickers, etc. Regarding the arms conflict, in 2016, the Colombian government, under the strong leadership of Mr. Santos, concluded an agreement for peace with one of the most powerful guerrilla groups in that time, the FARC. They are concretely making great effort to consolidate the peace-building process. JICA, for the best of ability, is also supporting this process in the form of technical assistance, which is Branch of Official Development Assistance, ODA, from Japan. Today, together with Mr. Kamijo, our resident representative, we would like to present a small original activity from our office to contribute to the issue of peace, in addition to conventional technical assistance. Well, Mr. Kamijo, a small original activity, what is that activity concretely?
Good morning, good evening, friends and everyone. My name is Kamijo, resident representative of JICA-Colombia. As Mrs. Sakai explained, we are providing support to consolidate the peace process in the form of technical assistance that belongs to the official development assistance of the Japanese government, about which I'd like to share with you on another occasions with sufficient time. But today I'd like to talk about another form of effort from the part of JICA-Colombia, of Japan, and of Japanese people for the issue of peace in Colombia. First of all, let me share with you the very important fact that in Colombia, the armed or internal conflict had continued for more than half a century, and many had been victims of violence, and the more important thing is that there are still many victims.
You mentioned it arms conflict, but specifically between which party did it exist?
It's so complicated that it's difficult to explain within the limited time. But if you allow me to summarize very drastically, the conflict had been between socialist or leftist, extreme rightist, and the very government forces. Also in the 80s and the 90s, this conflictive situation had turned to be more complicated by another type of conflict between drug gangsters, mafia. However, in 2016, a decisive moment finally arrived. The agreement for peace between the government and the most powerful guerrillas at that time had been signed.
That means there is no conflict anymore?
Unfortunately, the situation is not that simple. I used to work in Colombia from late 90s to the early 2000s. Yes, it's true, the security situations in this country has improved astonishingly. But it's a matter of a relative comparison between past and the present. Colombia continues to face a very tough situations with many problems to solve. The peace agreement was agreed between the government and the FARC, but there are still some armed groups in the country.
Do you mean that there are still victims of the conflict?
That's right. It would be better to understand that the first step toward the peace had just begun, and we must avoid going back. There are still millions of displaced people by violence and many victims of anti-personnel mines.
So the country still needs more support from the international community, including Japan, right?
Yes, for sure it does. However, this information about the very serious and the sad situations, especially the experiences of innocent victims of violence, may not have been shared enough with our people living in Japan until now.
Excuse me for mentioning a personal experience, but while I'm talking with my friends in Japan, they often worry about kidnapping and personal safety. Other than this, the information is limited to some stereotypes images of the typical tropical and cheerful Latin America country with exquisite coffee. But
No doubt Colombia is a very, very attractive country. But on the other hand, we, JICA, use the government budget, the sources of which come from Japanese taxpayers. That's why it's very important, first of all, to offer them the correct and the sufficient information about Colombia and ask them to understand the need to continue supporting Colombia.
you're right. But how can we do it?
I think that the public relations towards Japan will be fundamental. There are several forms of public relations, but it's important for us to start from what we can do.
For example,
I'm currently thinking of transmitting to Japanese society the true and living voices of the victims of violence and the armed conflict in Colombia. Me, 6 months ago, when I was tidying up the bookshelf in my office, and by chance I found these 3 books published by the mayor of the city of Medellin. The very famous sociologist named Mr. Alonso Salazar, when he was the mayor of that city, undertook this valuable project.
is he Mr. Salazar famous?
Yes, he's very famous. One of his bestsellers in Latin America is about the life of Pablo Escobar, Colombian godfather. Including more than 20 years ago, one of his books was published in Japan. The title is called We Are Not Born for Seed, which deals with young people from the slum neighborhood of Medellin in the 80s and the 90s. It focuses on the toughest time of that city.
And what are these 2 books that you have translated about?
Yes, they are a set of the real experiences of the victims. The mayor of Medellin, with the collaboration of the compiler, Mrs. Patricia Nieto, collected the voices of victims, having a firm conviction that these voices should never be forgotten. We must face history without ignoring it. And only with this attitude, the true process of peace and reconciliation can be guaranteed. Collecting the voices in a very honest way and with great patience, he transformed them into books. I greatly appreciate and respect this work of the people of Medellin and the college of the victims of the region of Antioquia of this country.
Oh, it seems very interesting, really. I would like to read it.
As you know, I can't wander around here and there for safety reasons. So I have dedicated most of my time on weekends to translating these 2 books. I have almost finished all the translations.
These are the translation, right? Yes. I will never forget your name. And heaven does not abandon me.
Yes, they are the words of people who are not professional to write. However, while translating these books, I really have been moved by their experiences.
Did you feel a deep emotion?
Yes, and not just one time.
Okay. I would like you to share them with all the Japanese and all the people around the world.
As for the first step, I am thinking of sharing with Japanese citizens in some way. These books are not for sale, so they cannot be published in Japan. But I'd like to think of another way for many Japanese and why not the people of other countries to know the Colombian reality and its necessity for the support.
Okay, we are interested in knowing more about that story and voices of the victim. Could you talk about that next time, please?
Okay, sure, with great pleasure. Okay.
Today I presented an original activity of ours to contribute to the piece, the translation of 2 books about the living and the real voices of the victim of the conflict. So everyone please keep checking our JICA-Colombian YouTube office channel and Facebook. And if you like, please subscribe to our channel. See you soon and taking great care of your health. See you later.
See you later.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.